From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. I'm Mac Fleet, filling in for Gurpreet Cambo today, and here are your 12 o'clock news and sports headlines on 1680 The Crow. If you live in Metro Vancouver and went to fuel up this morning, you were probably disgusted as you drove up to the pump. The price of gas at some station is currently as high as $239 per liter, which is an all-time record for any North American city, according to experts. Gas Price Wizard is predicting that the price will not stop there and could jump even higher as of Friday. Free flu shots will be available at pharmacies and community centers next month for everyone 6 months and older, and BC residents are being encouraged to roll up their sleeves for COVID-19 boosters this fall. Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says there's been almost no influenza for the last couple of years, and some young people have never been exposed to it. Bivalent vaccines offer protection against variants, including Omicron. About 350 people are currently hospitalized with COVID-19, and modeling suggests up to 700 more might need care in the next surge of the pandemic, expected around November through January. Health Minister Adrian Dix is set to provide another healthcare update at 1 p.m. today. In more local news, Metro Vancouver may get its first person of color this fall in council, but all three POC candidates say diversity is not their focus. Asta Pandikanan has the story.
Ginny Sims and Suk Dhaliwal are of South Asian origin, running for mayor in Surrey. Ken Sim is of Chinese heritage, running for mayor in Vancouver. All three of them say diversity is not their key focus for this election. Ginny Sims, running for mayor in Surrey, says her focus is bringing people together rather than dividing them along racial lines. Although if elected, she would be the first female South Asian mayor elected in the history of Metro Vancouver. Suk Dhaliwal and Ken Sim also say their aim is not to become the first POC mayors, but rather bring people together and repair any divide in their respective cities. Only 12% of Metro Vancouver's mayors and councillors are people of color, while 49% of the population they're serving are POC, according to the 2016 census data. Although their main goal is not diversity, if elected, it would be a historical event. Asta Pandikanan, 1680 The Crow.
The final meeting in New Westminster before the elections result in the approval of a permanent transit fund. Seamus Page has more.
The Mayor's Council in New Westminster has approved the submission to infrastructure public consultation on a permanent transit fund. The fund would result in the rollout of a $3 billion per year fund accelerating to 2024. This would ensure that the plan can proceed as proposed. This project, worth $340 million to TransLink, was announced in 2021 and is expected to provide permanent funding for transit when existing funds expire in 2026. TransLink is currently dedicating all federal funding to projects from their 10-year vision plan. Seamus Page, 1680 The Crow.
Events are planned across British Columbia to mark the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation on Friday. The survivor's flag was raised at the BC Legislature on Wednesday in a ceremony that Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation Minister Murray Rankin called, quote, profound and moving. Some events planned for Friday in Victoria include an afternoon gathering outside City Hall, a bike ride led by a member of the Songhees Nation describing the significance and history of Songhees Park, and the inaugural Songhees Nation South Island powwow. In Vancouver, members of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation walk 8.5 kilometers from the former St. Paul's Indian Residential School in North Vancouver to the reserve on the Dollarton Highway. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation was declared last year after hundreds of potential burial sites were located at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School, and ground-penetrating radar led to similar discoveries at other former residential schools. In more Indigenous news, an Indigenous documentary tackling issues with Canada's child welfare system has been added to Netflix just in time for Truth and Reconciliation Week. Reporter Riley Lyons has more.
Despite making up only 7% of the population, Indigenous children make up over 50% of kids in child welfare. The film For Love by Carrier Sakani Film Services and Walk Tall Productions tackles the long issue of Indigenous childcare and how to properly move forward. The director Matthew Smiley says that Indigenous kids need to be kept within their communities and culture.
Their love for their children is beautiful, is genuine, and I think what is really fascinating to see now is obviously an influx of prevention dollars.
With new money for prevention, Indigenous communities can fund childcare efforts within their own communities. Riley Lyons, 1680, The Crow.
Hundreds of hospital patients are being evacuated from facilities across the Fort Myers region in Florida. Ben Thomas has more.
We're in the process of evacuating 2 healthcare facilities to safer locations north.
Governor Ron DeSantis in his morning briefing. Hospitals have been hit by 3 main issues: power outages, floodwaters, and one large health system
without water in all of their facilities.
Florida Hospital Association President Mary Mayhew says that system's
fast approaching a point where they will not be able to safely take care of their patients.
At least 9 hospitals affected and 1,200 patients being evacuated. Meantime, the Florida Healthcare Association says about 3,400 residents have been moved from more than 40 nursing homes. I'm Ben Thomas.
Although the European Union has agreed to stop using Russian oil and gas, European member states are still importing nuclear fuel from Russia.
Much to the disappointment of Ukraine's government and environmental activists, EU member states are still trading uranium supplies with Russia. Environmental group Greenpeace has denounced regular shipments of uranium between Russia and France. The group say the ongoing trade of nuclear fuel is financing the war in Ukraine and extending Europe's energy dependence. The EU itself did not propose sanctions on Russia's nuclear sector in its latest sanctions package. However, Ukraine is pushing for European sanctions, with authorities arguing that all energy trade, including uranium, is used to finance Russia's war in Ukraine. I'm Karen Chamas.
Now on to today's sports headlines. The Canucks are looking to get their first win of the preseason tonight as they take on the undefeated Seattle Kraken. The Canucks will be wearing orange jerseys in warm-up for Truth and Reconciliation Day. While their neighbors at BC Place, the BC Lions, will host their second Orange Shirt Day on Friday night when they host the Ottawa Red Blacks. The first 10,000 fans in attendance will receive orange shirts with a special logo on it, and the Lions players will wear special Indigenous-themed helmets. In more NHL news, the Toronto Maple Leafs have re-signed defenseman Rasmus Sandin to a 2-year contract worth an average of $1.4 million per year. This signing could not have come soon enough for the Leafs, as they are already without defenseman Timothy Liljegren and Jake Muzzin to start the season. These injuries provide a chance for Sandin to establish himself into the Leafs' top 4, as he saw his role diminish last season with the emergence of Liljegren. The Canadian women's basketball team defeated Puerto Rico early this morning, 79-60, to advance to the World Cup semifinals, where they will play the U.S. on Friday. If Canada wins that game, it will be the first time they have medaled in this tournament since 1986, which is a long time. And in case you live under a rock, the New York Yankees' Aaron Judge tied Roger Maris's American League record of 61 home runs in a season with a tie-breaking 2-run drive in the 7th inning that helped the New York Yankees beat the Toronto Blue Jays 8-3 last night. Here's the call as Judge hits a home run to left field in the top of the 7th inning.
And the payoff. There goes the deep left. It is high. It is far. It is gone. Number 61. He ties Roger Maris for the American League single-season record with 61 home runs. It's a 2-run Judgian blast. Here comes the Judge. A 2-run blast, and the Yankees take a 5-3 lead on number 61 for Judge.
And the entire Yankee team is out on the field. They are hugging him one by one. Patty Judge is standing behind the Yankee dugout. She got a big smile on her face. And the Yankee team outside the dugout, everyone hugging him. Garrett Cole now hugging him. Aaron Boone, one of the first people out there. A beautiful, beautiful moment for this guy. Wow.
Every single player is out there. He's hugging each one at a time. I think it's fabulous. And also, that home run, that was gone when he swung the bat. What a rocket.
And in NFL news, the undefeated Miami Dolphins traveled to Cincinnati to take on Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Despite suffering what appeared to be a concussion in last Sunday's win over the Buffalo Bills, Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa is expected to start for the Dolphins. Despite Hurricane Ian tearing through much of Florida, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers announced today that their Sunday night game will still take place in Tampa after rumors were leaked that the game could be moved to Minnesota. And now for your Vancouver weather update. It is finally starting to feel like fall in the lower mainland. The high today will be 21 degrees, and the low will be 13, with partly cloudy conditions expected all throughout the day. Thank you for tuning into your 12 o'clock news and sports headlines with Mac Fleet on 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Hello, welcome. I'm joined by Jen. I'm joined by Kathy as well, two female fire captains from New Westminster and Burnaby. Slip of the tongue. Sorry. Joined by Kathy and Jen. Jen from Vancouver, Kathy from New Westminster. You guys are both fire captains. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Mm-hmm. So I like to start, timeline wise. You guys mentioned training under Fire Chief Howard, we were just talking about before we started recording here. What can you tell me about your guys' training days back in, was it 97 you mentioned?
Yeah, so Jennifer here. I started with Maple Ridge Fire Department in 1997 as a volunteer. In fact, I was a strict volunteer back then. It wasn't even a paid on call position. And we were earlier, before the podcast started, we were talking about Chief Howard Exner, who was one of the training officers for my recruit class. But both Kathy and I know him through his work through the Justice Institute of BC, which is the predominant training facility for all fire services in the province.
And Jen, you do training. I was going to ask you, were there any female trainers when you guys were first starting out?
No, there were no female instructors at all back when we both started. And in fact, both Kathy and I, we met through work at the Justice Institute I started there in 98. And we were technicians, so we assisted organizing the props, lighting the fires, filling bottles and doing those kinds of things to support the instructors. But it wasn't until 2016 that I transferred over to become an instructor in the Fire Academy.
So a similar experience for me, and Kathy here speaking. I began my career as a paid-on-call in Coquitlam, and I was part of a class of 8 recruits that were trained by the training division in Coquitlam. And at the time, I was hired at the Justice Institute in the Fire Safety Division as a technician, where, again, to echo what Jen was saying, was to support instructors in the programs that were running on site at the time. There were no training leads that were female at the time. And for me, the transition came in 2005, where I transitioned from being a technician to being an instructor, or recognized as an instructor at the JI. And currently in my role, I'm a senior training captain, in addition to being a fire suppression captain.
So Jen, do you notice, so back then compared to now, when you do your training now, did you notice a big discrepancy in the male and female gender gap between who's actually training to become firefighters?
Oh, absolutely. So in our early years, Kathy and I were we were definitely anomalies, the unicorn in the room. So there were very, very few women. In fact, I was the first female in Maple Ridge, and Kathy was the first hired female in New West. I was one of the first, maybe the third or fourth in Vancouver. So there were very, very few women pursuing that. And when you look at the process now, and you see the young women at the fire school, the class, it's incredible to see a class of 20 with 6 women out of the 20 in the group as women now. That was even, I would safely say that even 5 years ago, that was unheard of.
Yes. I mean, when we went through our training in the Fire School Academy, if you had one female in every other or third class that was run there, was kind of like what you would see, a rarity. Now, even in our recruit classes that we're hiring, we're seeing a change where the percentages of women to men are better than they've ever been. Are they great? Not quite yet. We still have a fair amount of work to do. We definitely, I think the overall sentiment is to get it so that it's a better representation of what we have in our communities in terms of peoples of all avenues. So I think the move is there for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And how could you describe your relationship with your male peers in these, early training days?
I would say that I was, my classmates, my cohorts, like super supported for the most part. There were definite challenges outside of that, but you get hired with a group and they're all on the same page as you. We're all aspiring. We're all trying to get through the fire school, or we're all, in our recruit class where we're hired together. And so there's a certain level of camaraderie, because you wouldn't have gotten that far if you weren't that kind of a person. The challenges that I personally faced were after my recruit class, once I was in the fire halls. So
from my perspective, I think that walking into being the first female in U.S. and getting hired was in itself a challenge, but it wasn't so much because of my firefighting skills per se, because I was very comfortable and solid with my skills. From my perspective, the biggest challenge was knowing the impact that I was having on, and arguably and fairly on the men, because they were all men, working in their environment that they formerly had, because there's no disputing that it changes the environment once you bring in different groups of people that they're not accustomed to working with. So it was finding my way through that to make it so that it was easier both for the men, but also for me to assimilate and work well with them.
Okay, yeah. And do you feel like once you mentioned, like, do you agree the same way? Like, once you were in the training camp, there was a sense of camaraderie. Everybody's grinding like through this course. Do you feel the same way as Jennifer there?
Well, it's interesting. We're a much smaller department than Vancouver, and Vancouver tends to hire large groups in one go. There were 3 of us that were hired, and US being smaller. So yes, there's an immediate bond. All 3 of you, and in my case, the 3 of us, were hired under the same premise, under the same exacting demands. And so there's a bond that's made that's really quick in the process once you first start. There were enough people that had been hired just before us that became part of the bond as well, because we were all, new.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps to kind of keep us in check, but also, elevated us through that whole early stages of our career.
Yeah. Did you guys feel like you had to prove yourselves once you were going in? Like, you had to prove yourselves that, like, did you feel that there was an expectation that you had to be tougher because you were a woman?
Oh, yeah. There is the saying that a female needs to be 10 times as good as her male colleague standing next to her just to be seen as an equal. And some varying degree of that. But, we definitely... there definitely is a little bit of that.
Well, there is, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that, you had to work twice, 3 times as hard as the next person to get the same equal recognition factor. Arguably, things have gotten better in the intervening years since we've started. I've noticed that especially with the latest groups of recruits that we've hired. Something that just hopped into my mind is the term double bind, and something that I had just recently heard. And the double bind is an interesting one here, especially as we progressed in our careers, especially now that we're leaders, because the perception that a male who's very assertive, straightforward, and gives, because in our world, orders is what runs,
chain of
emergent,
command,
emergent incidents,
rigid structures.
Exactly. So there is a perception, not among everyone, but among certain people, that if a male is very authoritative, assertive, takes control, he's considered to be very good and good as a leader. Whereas the perception now can twist a little bit with women in that because societal norms have us as maternal, caring individuals in society. But now in a role, especially in a commanding role, as we say in our service, that can flip the script a little bit with women as opposed to men.
Yeah, there's a well-known study, the Heidi and Harold study, that speaks to this exact concept where Harvard University, I believe it was, don't quote me on that, but one of the universities did a study with a bunch of students where they were looking at different leaders and their resumes, and they labeled one of them Heidi and one of them Harold, and everything about that resume, everything about that person was this exact same thing except for the name. And the students believed the male was somebody that they would want to work for, and the female was somebody they wouldn't want to work for. They felt that she was a bitch or bossy or all of those things, like that Kathy had alluded to. So that kind of weird double bind. So it
Were that exact same, when they're looking at, like, oh, I take initiative and whatnot, and my name is Harold, they view that as a good thing, but if you're saying,
Heidi
is stuck up or whatever other words you would use for that. Yeah. Do you find that, so you guys are both captains, do you find that, sometimes your authority doesn't come across as strong as some of like the other male captains or male chiefs?
I don't know that I feel that, to be quite honest. I don't. I think that's a societal thing more so than, because, we actually do know our individual people that we're working with, our crews, the young people that are with us. What I do find interesting sometimes is civilians, that when you get off the rig and the civilian, if there's a guy that is standing next to me, if he's got salt and pepper hair, they might just naturally be drawn to him, and then he'll have to say, go talk to her, she's the boss, right? So it's a weird predicament, but I don't feel like that is the case in the fire company itself.
No, and that's very true. Like within my crew or crews that I manage and lead, I do not get that sense at all. It's more generalized is what I'm trying to convey here. And when, and the case example you used is something that happens to me too. I think it happens to every female captain that I've ever spoken to, where you show up and you got your command board and you're making decisions, and they'll go straight to the driver who happens to be on the other side of the truck. So yeah, I think that as time goes on, as more of us become, accustomed to seeing women in roles like ours, that will subside to some extent over time.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few women hired in our era when Kathy and I started, and then there was a bit of a lull for most organizations. So here we are in our positions, our leadership positions as officers, but it's going to be a big gap before there are more women in leadership roles. Kathy's the only captain at this, in the trucks in New West, and there's only two of us in Vancouver that are sitting in the front seat. So, like Kathy spoke to, again, it's going to take some time before society kind of gets used to that as well. And I think that in terms of more women joining the fire service, I think a big part of it is you can't be what you can't see. That's one of our, mottos that we've used through Camp Ignite over the years. But I think that the more women see other women in those positions, the more they imagine themselves in those positions. So whether it is in a leadership position or whether it's even simply just pursuing the fire service in general.
Yeah, definitely. What I'm seeing too, combined with that while I'm thinking about it, is the shift among our newer, more junior members. That whole piece about having to work 3 times harder, 4 times harder than your male counterpart to prove yourself is lessened, in my view, in the last few years. I mean, I know, I see it, I hear it from the male colleagues and junior male colleagues, that there's a sense of, we don't care what you look like, where you come from, what background you have, as long as you can do the job.
Yeah.
And that's a prevailing sense that I'm getting within my workplace anyway.
Yeah, I do agree with what Kathy is saying in that, like, but again, we're talking, we were from over 2 decades ago. Yes. Was when we were pursuing this. And so things have changed, society has changed as a whole. So it would make sense that, people are coming into this career with a more diverse background, whether or not you're a female or a male. So I think that the playing field's a little bit leveled in that sense. So everybody is, and younger people seem to have a different kind of respect for each other, I think, than maybe. I think there's just a lot of different complex things that are happening in the world to present a different opportunity to look at things than what we had when we were younger.
I think the worldview lens of our newer hires is wider than the folks that we first initially started working with, because back then we
didn't have cell phones.
No, we didn't have cell phones.
Oh my God.
I think dating ourselves right now. What? A cell phone? Because and entering into it, the men that were already established within the service were single career minded, single profession minded. Many didn't actually have nearly as much education as many people are walking into the fire service now. So that also changes your worldview.
Yeah.
And how you would approach.
Oh, absolutely.
A new employment circumstance or, change in life.
Yeah. Jen, what do you think, this one's specifically for you because you handle a lot of training. What do you think are some of the positive steps that, people like you in your position can make towards inspiring younger female firefighters? I understand that there's more. What do you think there's more than ever? What do you think are some of the positive steps that need to be taken or are currently being taken?
Well, I would say, things like what we've done with Camp Ignite, inspiring people young to, let them know they can do whatever they want, whether they choose firefighting or not, absolutely is important. I think that just making ourselves available to assist younger firefighters, and that goes without saying that it's our male or female young firefighters. If anybody comes to me with any kind of question or, I'm happy to support them as best I can. And I don't know that we necessarily had that same kind of support when we were younger. Just the dynamics of the culture were a little bit different. So
I think too, it's removing the mystery of it all to the best that we can, and making it known about the career and more education around what it is what is actually entailed in taking on a career as a firefighter, and like I said, removing the mystery or demystifying the Hollywood factor. Mm-hmm. That comes with our career. And I think that the more is made visible out there, whether through a program like Camp Ignite, social media, websites like FSWBC, which is doing a tremendous job at bringing awareness, is only going to help things long term at like I said, demystifying the career or the possibility of a career.
I think absolutely what you said earlier, Jen, like what you can't be, what you can't see. That's why I think a Facebook page like FSWBC is like so important, because, I completely agree with you. If you can't see female firefighters, why would a female ever want to be a firefighter, right? Totally.
It's simply something you don't think about. It's not that when I was younger, it's not that I ever thought that I couldn't do it. For me,
oh no,
I honestly, it had never actually occurred to me until somebody suggested it. Somebody suggested it as an opportunity for me, and I thought, oh, interesting. And then I was, I looked into it, and
Oh,
here
interesting. That's such a different experience than I had. I come from a firefighting family. And I used to hang around my dad's fire hall at lunchtime in between school classes. And I'd say, I want to do this. I want to do this line of work. I want to become a firefighter. And it was like laughed at. I mean, you have to go back many years for that. But when it started to become real, then I aligned myself with my education and all the other aspects to pursue it. It never occurred to me that I would not be able to do this work in any way. I mean, that was my grounder.
Yeah. And in terms of some of the younger, kind of circling back to your question there, I think one of the things that we are aspiring to do through Fire Service Women BC is provide opportunities for women to get together and train together, to give them that confidence. So when they're working in another group of women, they can get good at whatever that skill might be, as opposed to trying to have the confidence to even participate in a male only or in a male predominant training session. So I think that will make a difference for some of the younger women. And again, it's, there's varying degrees amongst different fire services throughout the province and, well, really throughout the world. But some departments are very progressive and are very supportive of people in general. And there are most definitely departments out there that may be sitting a little bit in the dark ages. Yet that one woman might be in that organization and really feel challenged. Her confidence might really feel challenged. So I think that's one of the things that we can do to support other women. And we just don't know. We don't know what your situation is in your workplace. Sometimes we keep some of these things very close to ourselves and don't share some of our, less than stellar experiences. But we just don't know what.
It can definitely be like a case by case, and I'm sure it goes by district by district, like you said. Some can be more progressive, some can be in the dark ages. Maybe it's a 100% male fire hall for 10 years, and what does that look like, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I work in what is currently quite a progressive fire department. So. And with being afforded the opportunity to be a senior training captain, it has, I'd like to believe, made a big difference in our approaches in that way. So for that, I'm really grateful to have been given the opportunity that I've had to be where I'm at. But the support mechanism is an important one. Just like men will support each other, men will also support us. But women, it's ultimately very important, while we're still such a small minority overall, to support each other. And there's definitely differences. I mean, we'd be naive to say, yeah, we're the same. We're the same as the men. Well, we're not. Mm-hmm. We're women and they're men, and there are very specific things that are applicable to us. And it's knowing that you have that sisterly support, understanding, oh yeah, that's a challenge that we go through that men don't necessarily go through. And how do you cope with it? And so it's all these coping mechanisms that we found out on our own, Jen and I and our sisters of our same era, that now we can share. Yeah. As we picked our way through the best and not so best ways of handling it.
And, we were fortunate, like Kathy and I have known each other, like we said, since our, baby firefighter days. And so, we were fortunate that we could share a story with one another. But sometimes, again, that was just luck because we worked at even though we weren't in the same fire department, we didn't necessarily work with other women in our organizations, but we knew each other.
Oh! It's an activity that has made quite a racket, literally. Perhaps you've seen it in tennis courts at your local park, or some other courts that seem built just for it. The back and forth of a ball hitting the ground, the unmistakable clash of a racket hitting the ball, the laughter of competitors playing against each other. Pickleball is a sport that has recently exploded in popularity, with associations popping up across the Lower Mainland and membership within clubs booming. Even if you don't know any club members, you may have a family member or friend who has been swept into playing casually. We wanted to hear from some members about why they joined the craze.
Tom Westendorf is the marketing and sponsorship coordinator for the club, having joined on in 2019 just before the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. He first became acquainted with the sport around 2013.
My name is Tom Westendorf, and I'm responsible for sponsorship, donations, and marketing for the club. My wife actually started first about 6 years ago, and when I first heard the name, I thought, kind of a weird name for a sport, and sort of probably made a little fun of her for the first little while until I started playing. For me, it was about 4 to 5 years ago. I mean, it's really good exercise. The good thing is that it can be played by just about anybody. So this winter, with COVID and that sort of thing, I felt that this would be a good opportunity for me to get myself engaged with the club more seriously. So I think it's still in its infancy. I think it's picking up speed, if anything. Now this might sound silly, but I would not be very surprised to see this sport be competed, at a maybe even Olympic level someday. It's a great sport. It keeps you active. You get to meet a lot of people.
Kemi Dong is a retiree and has been a part of the club since last year. However, she will enjoy her first full season of pickleball this spring, and she is very excited.
Was playing tennis, and I used to go take a lesson every day. But then it was so boring because I couldn't find any players to play. So it was really frustrating, and then I look at this pickleball. So I was kind of struggling first, and then people were so helpful. So then I just started loving it. So I do that like every day to learn something different. It's like a full-time job for me now. Yeah. I'm here to play pickleball. I told my family, if the dinner is not ready, that means you can find me in pickleball courts. I retired, so I really needed a hobby. I always like sports. I've been doing hiking and, taking tennis lessons, whatever. But the pickleball I found is I found this passion. It's because I wish I found this pickleball maybe 10 years ago.
In our meeting with Kemi, we soon discovered something incredible. She urged us to meet with someone who had become a sort of legend within the club.
If you're here, there is a 98 years old guy who's going to be here in a few minutes. And he plays pickleball. And he teaches pickleball. And he always wins the pickleball game.
No way.
He's going to be here, I told him.
Meet Stan Fryer. At 96 years old, he can still play the game, and then some.
I'm just turning 96.
Having seen so much happen to the sport over a short period of time, Stan was hopeful for what heights pickleball could reach in the coming years.
I think it'll wind up in the Olympics.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
I really do.
Yeah.
It's probably the fastest growing sport, certainly in North America, than any other sport has ever grown.
Yeah.
They're putting, I think, 12 new courts in Vancouver, and courts are springing up everywhere. It's just amazing. Yeah. That's the beautiful part of this sport. People can play it right up till, I'm sure, over 100 if they wanted to.
There were points where we actually paused our interview to observe the sport.
See, they're all moving up to the...
Yeah, they're moving up there in that far game. Yeah.
And you make a lot of good friends. A lot of good friends. Well, I started out playing in the church first, and we had a club there, And that was going for, that's been going for the 20 years in the church. The club out here didn't get started till probably 5 or 6 years later. A lot of these people I've taught, so that's how they all know me. I think I've taught at least probably 1,500 people.
Really?
Yeah, over the 20-year period, 18-year period. I think that's what some people play a game of just body. I try to play a head game.
From talking to these three players, it's clear that pickleball is more than just a sport to them. To Tom, it's part of his job to coordinate the club's development as word spreads in the community. It gets him more involved with the sport, which he enjoys. For Kimi, it's a time killer to have fun with other players competitively and casually. Her social circle revolves around the sport since discovering it. And for Stan, his passion is something that he can still partake in at his age, meaningfully with friends and family. That's a blessing you can't not appreciate.
I'm Seamus Page with my co-host and co-producer Jacob New for 1680 The Crow.
As COVID restrictions are slowly fading away, the Coquitlam Dodgeball League prepares for opening night of their 27th season, the first full season since COVID started.
When most people are looking for a recreational sports league to join, they think of hockey, basketball, or maybe soccer. However, this group of people have found their passion for dodgeball. The Coquitlam Dodgeball League, or CDL, was founded in 2007 and started with 16 teams. Now, it's made up of 40 teams with over 350 players. One player, Rob Gerard, has been playing in the CDL since it first began and is the only player to play every single year. 15 years later, he still plays, but is also the league director, which means he focuses on day-to-day tasks as well as launching every season. Rob doesn't make any money off the league. In fact, sometimes it's difficult to balance time between his job, family, and the CDL. He does this because he's passionate about the league and bringing people together.
I'm the only person that has played every season of the CDL. I've been a part of every single season, and I think I can count on one hand the amount of Wednesday nights that I've missed.
When asked how Rob got into dodgeball in his adult life, he said that it started on a whim.
And they were just three 20-something-year-old kids, and they got started on the Coquitlam Dodgeball League. And, I got a call saying, do you want to play dodgeball? And I thought that sounded like it could be something kind of fun to kill my time on a Wednesday night. I didn't realize that it was going to result in 15 years of work, but here we are.
Rob also explains the most difficult task of being the league director.
It's launching the season, no question. I'd say 90% of the work I do happens before the season starts. It's arranging gym rental contracts, ensuring that we have insurance. More recently, it's been making sure that we are in alignment with provincial health orders.
COVID added another layer of difficulty to Rob's job.
The pulse of the league wasn't a positive one at that time. People weren't too enthusiastic to expand their bubbles with people that they didn't really know very well.
We joined the CDL at Rochester Elementary in Coquitlam for their first opening night since the pandemic started. We were instantly met with warm welcomes and could feel the excitement and energy in the gym. Shortly after, league staff members jumped on stage to give everyone a reminder of the rules and regulations of the CDL.
Infraction happens at the end of the night, they will not be able to play the following week. Let's avoid that and not throw at each other's faces. Okay, cool. Let's play some dodgeball.
One of those rules and regulations is called a showdown.
Teams, there's a 10-second count. And if both players are still alive at the end of that 10-second count, we go to a showdown. And a showdown is one ball on each side of the middle, and each player gets 2. And there are no lines. There's no line boundaries. So it's just an absolute free-for-all, winner takes all. I was part of the CDL's very first showdown, and it was against a 7-year-old girl. Somebody brought their daughter to watch, and she wanted to play a game, and I couldn't bring myself to throw as hard as I could at this girl, so I was like, okay, I'll go to a showdown. And once the showdown started, the second I started walking towards her, she just dropped the balls and ran towards her mom, and I felt awful. I felt so bad. This little girl was so intimidated.
After that, the games got underway, and we were lucky enough to catch up with league founder Darren Domingo. Darren tells us what inspired him to create the CDL.
Actually, the real reason that we started the league here was because there wasn't, we couldn't play on the day that they were holding it anymore in Vancouver, so we decided to play it on Wednesdays in Coquitlam, and we started our own thing.
This season brought one entirely new team to the league, the Crusaders. One member of the team had just moved from Ontario to British Columbia. He said that finding new friends has been his biggest challenge since the move. Hoping to change that, he joined the CDL to meet new people in his new home. The Coquitlam Dodgeball League is also an active participant in the local community. They both host and contribute to a variety of local events that benefit organizations such as Canada Cancer Society, SHARE, and the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada. They even dedicated a special tournament to honor the passing of Amanda Todd, whose brother is a part of the league. Rob explains that emotional moment.
We hosted the first annual Amanda Todd Legacy Tournament, and we raised a bunch of money. Amanda's mom was there. She said some words. And then we played the tournament, and it ended pretty poetically, actually. Amanda's brother plays in our league, and his team, although they were huge long shots, they ended up winning the entire thing.
The Coquitlam Dodgeball League looks to continue to make an impact on their community by bringing people together and hosting charity events. My name is Kyle Collis with Evan Tate, and you're listening to 1680, The Crow.
Maybe I'll play this song. Can you imagine having to shut up for 2 years? That's how it felt for Ty Koch, one of the emergent musicians of Vancouver. But before going too deep into the challenges he faced during COVID, let's hear about Ty and his love for music.
Music was always something I had just done, especially with singing. It was almost like subconscious. I just always did it. There wasn't ever a time where I didn't see myself singing. It was always something.
Ty Koch has been booked across Canada and Europe playing his own music or singing classical music with a chord. And that's how he envisioned his musical career, never sticking with just one genre.
Yeah, they're very different. Because when I'm playing with the band, with the guys, like I'm just having fun. Like it's not stressful really. And even then, it's like you're kind of just like you're showing off a little bit. Like it's a different thing. Whereas when it comes to classical music, I feel like the music's, I mean, in comparison to the music I write, I feel like it's more important. Like, and there's a lot more things to consider because the music's a lot more challenging rather than something I wrote. Because if it's my own, I can just do what I want. But following the classical music, there's very specific things that are dictated in the music that you have to follow.
But what looked to be the rising of a new promising career came to a full stop all thanks to COVID-19.
I think it's bad to try and frame it like that. Obviously, I've had those thoughts of like, oh, you know, I would have been that much more ahead, and that's something that I did struggle with at first. But like, I mean, the more you just kind of reflect on stuff like that, the worse it gets. Because if you just spend all of your time thinking, oh, I could have had this, I could have had that, and then you just don't end up doing anything, which is what happened to me for quite a little while. It was like I was just sad. I had all these opportunities and they vanished. Like I was going to do like a tour in Europe with the choir I worked for, and I had all these other things planned, but that was the same situation for everyone. So you can't spend forever dwelling on what could have been.
Ty faced depression during the pandemic, and in music and friends, he found a way to cope with an uncertain future of his musical career.
I think it was literally like a coping thing. So it was like, for me, it was always like, oh, whenever I like felt upset or like angry or anything, it was like, oh, I can go play the blues music, go play on my guitar. So it was like, just to distract myself, that was what I did when I couldn't go out and see friends or like interact with anyone. I was just at home, basement, just cranking as loud as I could. Beginning of COVID, I played guitar so obsessively that I got tendonitis. So I was playing like 6 hours every day. I got way better, but now my wrist isn't quite as strong.
But for his roommate, Michael McKenzie, it just wasn't very nice to hear live music all the time.
It's nice for the most part. Occasionally it's pretty annoying when he's singing and I'm trying to nap, but other than when I'm napping, it's nice background noise, you know. He changes it up, whether it be opera or, because depending if it's his church stuff or his own music, it's either like blues, rock, or, you know, like opera, hymns.
Now that things have started to reopen, there isn't a boom like in other markets, because as Ty describes, COVID affected an industry that in Vancouver was already decaying before the pandemic.
And I think the unfortunate part with Vancouver is there isn't a lot of live venues. So now that it's finally coming back, there's other opportunities that are popping up, but it was like already kind of a dying music scene, unfortunately. People just don't really love to go to live music, which is pretty sad.
But not everything is bad. There are new opportunities and venues opening. Plus, Ty will finally be able to quit his job as a lifeguard.
I think there's some things that, like there's some, I know friends that I'm working with who are working towards opening other venues or working with other venues, because there's a format already in place in Vancouver that doesn't really work in terms of like live music. So there's people just looking at other avenues, so there's more opportunities within the city at least. And then for me, I've now taken a leave of my job as a lifeguard just because I needed a break, and I'm just going mostly all in on the music.
Like all new artists, Ty will have to regain the positioning and popularity he lost due to COVID, and to do so, Ty will be touring in Vancouver Island during the summer and will be releasing new music in late June. David Nava,
Dennis Shinolu, 1680 The Crow.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.